Good evening, everyone. Good evening, sir. It's an absolute pleasure to welcome Dr. Rajiv Kumar, who's Vice Chair of Niti Aayog, and of course my senior colleague, Vice Chancellor Raj Kumar, Professor Mohan Kumar, and Professor Ram Ramachandran. Sir, we started this conclave yesterday in the morning, and during the course of these 2 days, 26 academics, 6 senior policymakers, and 14 experts from the industry and NGO sector spoke for about 13 hours deliberating on issues across 9 sessions. These were essentially 9 critical questions relevant to the goal of the current government of building a $5 trillion economy.
All these things, people should be congratulated for this.
And I'm so happy to share that this included a terrific debate on the question, should India emulate the Chinese model of economic growth and development, and in what form and how and when? There were very convincing arguments on both sides. I know students are very eager to know the result, which we are going to announce in the next few minutes. So please be patient. But once again, I extend a very, very warm welcome to our chief guest, Dr. Rajiv Kumar. We are delighted to have you with us, sir, and I request the Vice Chancellor, Raj Kumar, to address the crowd.
All right, very good evening to all of you. I really applaud the students here who have come all the way from Sonipat yesterday and of course today, really being engaged in the course of the last couple of days. I was of course present yesterday, but I couldn't be present this morning, but I know that I heard from Ashish that it's been a very engaged discussions in various forums. I'm grateful to all the speakers of the various thematic sessions for their presence and participation in this first Global Finance Conclave. The validity session is very special for us because I don't know how many of you know this, but we actually began this idea of having a Global Finance Conclave by thinking, how do we get Dr. Rajiv Kumar to come and give a speech? And that's how we started. And so we thought, okay, let's do a Global Finance Conclave. And then he accepted very quickly to inaugurate it. And then he realized that the particular day in which he accepted, he had something else to do. So what was supposed to be sort of a one-day Global Finance Conclave ended up becoming a 2-day Global Finance Conclave, because this was the only time and day when Dr. Rajiv Kumar could be part of it. So we are very, very grateful to Dr. Kumar for accepting our invitation. For those of you who may not be familiar with Dr. Kumar has had a very distinguished career. He has traveled across the world of academia and private sector and of course the government. But most importantly, Dr. Kumar is somebody who has always spoken truth to power, and the kind of work that he is right now undertaking at the Niti Aayog is significantly important for our country, and he has maintained his intellectual integrity and rectitude in all his work within the government. I had the privilege to meet him in another avatar which he had in FICCI. And I must say those were early days of our university. And this was several years ago. We are, of course, now celebrating our 10th anniversary. So you can imagine this was pretty much the first 3 to 4 years of our own existence. And Dr. Kumar believed in JGU long before the world discovered and recognized us. So I'm grateful to him for his encouragement and support and inspiration to our institutional journey. And I think it is only fair to say that we're very fortunate that somebody like him is right now heading Niti Aayog. So without further ado, I want to extend a warm welcome to Dr. Kumar for his presence, and we are all obviously eagerly waiting to hear him today. Thank you very much.
I see very nervous faces there. Why? I think both teams did really, really well. And huge round of applause, given that. Yeah, yeah. I know you spent sleepless nights, a few of them for sure. I wish you studied as much in your regular class as you did for the debate, so I'll leave it at that. So the subject of the debate was, should India emulate Chinese model of growth and development? That was the topic. And so there was a team for and against, and so they did a regular debate. So there were five members right here this morning, and so there was anxiousness written on the face from yesterday, because we didn't tell them whether they're going to be doing for or against. And so this morning when they landed here, we told them this is what you're going to do. So there was a little bit of nervousness. I think you guys did amazingly well. One team did, I think, based on the scores from the jury members, it seems like one of you did a little more from a content perspective, and one of you did a little more from a presentation standpoint, right? It was an extremely close contest. And the 2019 team, which is Team Rhodium. So our teams were named after precious metals, or the most precious metals. So Team Rhodium, which is a 2019 batch, scored 281 points out of 3. So in the 2-person horse race, the platinum team 2018 batch got 287 points. It was that close. So well done to both the teams. Excellent. Where are the trophies? Where is the trophy? So I would request, please calm down. Yeah. So the team that said that India should not emulate the Chinese economic model, they won. So they were against it. Sorry. So can I request two mentors, Professor Amlan Dasgupta and Professor Soumyadeep, if he's here? Yeah, okay, so there you go, right. And to collect the trophy on behalf of the students to the winning team first, Professor Amlan, can you come? No, they will come, they'll get it. Yeah. So can I request our chief guest? You are getting it.
So there are 5 debaters and 5 researchers.
Please go and.
Yeah, 5 of you join. And then let's take another photo of the.
Come quickly, please.
No, I suggest let it be 5 of you come.
5 speakers.
Let's have the 5 speakers first.
Wait. We'll do it later. The 5 researchers, please. 5 researchers, please come quickly.
Yeah, the speakers can leave now. All right, please.
Come quickly.
They decided amongst themselves. Yeah.
Wonderful. Can I request Professor Soumyadeep? Runner. Team, 2019 speaker team, please come to the stage. Quickly. And the research team, please come to the stage quickly. Just one more. Quickly. Thank you. Mr. Rajiv Kumar, I request you to please come and address the students. Yes, yeah.
First and foremost, I must express my most sincere, heartiest congratulations for JGU to get the Institute of Eminence Award. This is wonderful, I mean, amazing, most richly deserved, and I'm glad to know that it came because they organized this conference for me. So, wonderful, well done. And then to all the winners of the debate here, but more importantly, I haven't seen more patient students. You've been waiting here for 2 days, you said, and this is incredible. I mean, so and even to see you there at this time. And I hope the university treated you well when they brought you out from Sonipat to here and made you stay overnight. Somebody's saying no. So, anyway, it's wonderful for me to be here. It's always nice to be among students. I always call myself a frustrated teacher, professor, because I only taught for 2 years at the Institute of Foreign Trade, and then I got into think tank world and the policy world, etc. Those 2 years were the most satisfying, I must confess, very satisfying parts of my life. I still meet my students after I taught that in 87 to 89, when probably most of you around there were not even born. But you still meet those students, and I think this is wonderful to be back here and to see the energy and the enthusiasm. I'm Professor Rajkumar and all the colleagues, and Mohan and Sudarshan, and everybody sitting here. I'm not sure as to, I want to inflict a full-fledged speech on India's march towards $5 trillion economy, because that will be too much at the end of 2 days. Maybe what I should just do is that, but how many of you believe that India can make it to a $5 trillion economy by 2025? Not so many. That's a very good, it's a minority, okay, a small minority. So please understand that we are at the moment about $2.8 trillion or $2.7 trillion, something like that. So reaching 5 trillion is less than doubling the economy in 5 years. So that's basically it. So you have to, if you look at the requirement that you have in front of you, is to grow at about 12%, 11.8% nominal terms, the GDP growth per year. Now 11.8 or 12% per nominal term per year means about 8.5% real GDP growth rate and about 4% inflation. That's what the task is. And so I'm trying to convince those all those who didn't raise their hands about this. The fact is that India did achieve, if you know, between 2003 to 2011, 8.5% growth for those 8 years, and so we have done it. And for those within those 8 years, 2 years where we achieved 9.2% or 9.3% rate of growth. So Indian economy can grow at that pace. So any argument or any perception that we are just not up to it, I think is misplaced. The thing that happened there at that time is that growth was accompanied with a huge spate of inflation. And you saw inflation getting into double digits, and therefore, and also a huge, probably infeasible expansion of bank credit, where banks were, financing a lot of long-term projects, and therefore there was an asset liability mismatch, and therefore, the bank credit that resulted in all the NPAs that the 8.5 lakh crores, etc. But more importantly, has resulted in a bank credit to the economy declining, the growth of bank credit to the economy declining consistently from 2011 onwards till 2018. It then rose again a little bit, but it's declining again. So let me just 2 points, mostly. One, that after 2008, it's a difficult global scenario, but not as difficult for us to expand our exports, both of goods and services, so that our share in world trade is a mere 2.2% of global trade, and China's is 10.8. So there is no reason that we can't double or triple our exports from 300 odd billion dollars to go, because the share is so small. That's one part of it. That despite the somewhat difficult global economy, we need to. The second point is that there is enough within the economy in the structural factors that has a lot of locked up growth potential. And I really don't want to go into detail because, I cannot see you focusing on this, but I mean, just give you therefore some little sort of, high points. Agriculture, 43% of labor force producing 14, or some people say 16% of GDP. Amazing. Labor productivity in agriculture, ours is 1/100th of those amongst other BRIC countries, South Africa, for example, and BRICS and so on, other BRICS. Agriculture exports, almost negligible. Crop diversification, crop pattern, all kinds of, is fairly distorted. Agriculture, if you modernize agriculture, and which is what the government wants to do, you can easily get more than 100 basis points of extra growth. I mean, that's absolutely a given. Agro-processing, agri-value added, our farmers grow tomatoes and they'll get you, at the season time, it'll get you, half a rupee a kilo. And at the same time, we import 3,000 crore worth of tomato puree, which is used for, pizza topping. So why can't these tomatoes be? Only 10% of our agricultural output is agro-processed. And 20, some people say 18, some people say 23 of agricultural output is wasted, because from all the intermediary layers. I can go on and on. 90% of our water is used up in agriculture, while in Israel it's only 20%, which is a desert. Why can't we bring that down, bring the cost down? Our wheat price is probably 40% more, 30% more than the global price. So we can't export it. You've seen that sugar exports recently announced had to have 6,000 crore of subsidies. Agriculture sector, if you modernize it today and bring it to sort of globally comparable levels, you will get, I can assure you, about 150, 200 basis points more of growth per year for a long time to come. Because there's a huge potential here as you withdraw labor from agriculture to a certain extent, and as you simply also reduce government intervention in agriculture. So that's one. Second, I talked about exports already. For the last 7 years, credit to the export sector is declined and is also negative now. So that the exporting sector is really short of credit. And as I said, we haven't crossed the peak that we already reached about 8 years ago of $321 billion. We just sometimes cross it. We're still stuck. And our share in exports to GDP has been actually declining over the last 4 or 5 years. We reached a peak of 21.4%, and then it's been declining, is now about 19. China's peak at that time was 36% at one point of time, just to give a comparison. So exports is a second area where you've got huge growth potential. And exports not just of goods. Medical tourism is a great export. I mean, our universities today are such that they should be able to invite foreign students rather than us spending about $5-6 billion sending our children abroad. That could be an export earner. The tourism, 7 million tourists, 10 million tourists now in India, foreign tourists. China gets 52. Thailand gets 25. New York gets more than, 60 or something million odd. So the huge potential, I mean, look at the numbers that I'm quoting to you, 7 to 50, 7 to 25. Now, these are orders of magnitude. So if you increase them, I mean, these are all exports. These are all exports. So why can't we do that? The fourth area is the banking sector. And I'll just end with one statistics, and that should, I suppose, impress upon you. Our private debt to GDP ratio, not public debt. Our public debt to GDP is controlled by the FRBM Act, and it should not be more than 60%, 40 for the center, 20 for the states. But our private debt to GDP, which is households and private companies, etc., our private debt to GDP ratio is 54%. In a country like Korea, it's 200%. In China, it's 143%. There's a massive leverage that we can have here. I mean, if you just expand credit in the economy, and that will happen not by any order, but by making our banking sector much more competitive, much more efficient, and much more, much more capable of assessing risks and going out and so on. So that's the, I mean, again, the long discussion that we can have here. But that one statistics is just key, actually, because in China after 2008 actually used only domestic leverage to push up their growth, because their export dependence was coming down at that time, and their current account surplus, which peaked at 9%, brought down to about 1% and sometimes less. So that's a huge shift that they made. We can do we can also use our leverage. So that's the fourth issue. The five is our energy efficiency. We produce about 1.4 terawatt of electricity, but our per capita production of energy is only 1,200 kilowatt, 1.2 megawatt. The lowest among the top 20 countries and among the G20 countries. And we have our energy production, the transmission and distribution losses, the state of our discoms, 3.5 lakh crore of loans and debt on them. The fact that industry cross subsidizes domestic, to a huge extent, so that the costs are all borne by the industry, so that they become globally uncompetitive, etc. I mean, I can, again, public transport. Can you imagine, we have only 20% of the public buses in this country that are required. Of all the total number of buses that are required in this country, according to any standard, we have only 20% and no more. So, I mean, if you improve that, then the whole public transport model can change, become better. Some metros are coming, but so on. So that energy efficiency, both on the supply side and the demand side, I think is huge. And and finally here is the role of the public sector in the economy, and the role of public sector enterprises in the economy. Huge amounts of value locked up there. I haven't got the slide just now, but I don't know how many of you know Hindustan Zinc is a public sector company that was privatized, and Vedanta bought it. I forget what the year at that time. I think it was done in Mr. Vajpayee's government at that time. That time their stock price was something like 3.7 or something like that, rupees per stock. At the moment it is 370. And they have found more reserves than they were ever handed on. At the same time, they're producing silver from where there was, and all at that time when it was handed over, the story was that the zinc deposits are finishing in that area. That was the story. Now they found new deposits, they're producing zinc. Now this sort of value is locked up in a large number of public sector enterprises, and we want to privatize them, we want to sell them. Niti Aayog has recommended 46 to be privatized. The cabinet has approved 26 of them, and therefore they should be on the line, and they should now. So, but there is a massive, I mean, again, there can be a very long, and some of I hope you will get into that. If you have a sector in which you have a public sector company which has no budget constraint, it can make as much losses as it can, then its effect on the rest of the competitors is amazing. It's very, it's very negative. It's sort of, you can't, they can't possibly remain in that business, as is happening in the airline industry, if you notice. It's because airline, so now, and last but not the least is that we don't ever try and pull together in this country. You have one policy, there will be any number of people who will be opposing it. So and I put it together as the weakness of our social capital. And that something has to be done to create a trust between our different stakeholders, between the civil society and the government, between the government and the industry, between the industry and the media. All of these, somehow or the other, all the stakeholders are not being able to come together and say that, look, this is what we want to achieve. This is how we need to go there. That I think maybe can be helped by having a target like the one that the Prime Minister has given us. And let me just sort of therefore saying that what I have pointed out to you, that in each one of these sectors, you've got about 100 to 200 basis points of growth locked in there. So if you are achieving 6 today, or if you are achieving 7.5 for the last 5 years as an average, there is no reason to believe that your rate of growth of potential output cannot be put up beyond 9.5%. And this is, in fact, it should not even be a question, really, in my mind. The only thing is that we need to, if you like, all these things that I mentioned have to get your act together, and that started. You know, the 3 announcements of the finance ministers now, the number of reforms in the pipeline, the sector reforms. The government is not in the habit of making headlines. The government is in the habit of making incremental but meaningful reforms, the cumulative impact of which can be significant. And that's probably what will happen. And you will see in the first 5 years, all the attention was on making sure that the benefits of growth accrue to those at the bottom of the pyramid, so that the growth is not more inequitable. So that people don't get behind. The whole trickle-down theory would not work. And we have put in place, therefore, an effective development state, so that people can't say that India, the Indian state is incapable of doing everything, etc., etc. You have proven that you can open 350 million bank accounts. You have proven that you can give out 120 million gas stoves. You can and so on. And Swachh Bharat, etc. So that's been done, and now the focus is on, the government's focus is on accelerating growth and removing these structural impediments. Now the only thing that I have not mentioned so far is that the key here, because I don't know what the answer is up to you, and I look forward to your suggestions, is on how to improve the quality of education in general. Because our greatest resource is human resources, because that's the so-called much talked about demographic dividend, etc. But that depends entirely on the quality of that resource, and at that quality of the resource which it can become globally comparable and globally competitive. Now, what does one do? Where does one begin? Now, we have begun at the higher education level by having these institutes of eminences, never done before, releasing them from the over-regulation of compliance requirements of a particular regulator. But very often people talk to me, they tell me that it has to begin at the primary school level. And it has to become at the primary school level in general, and not just in very small segments. But even before that, and I'm the chairman of the National Nutrition Council in the country, it has to begin between the ages of 6 months to 24 months. If our children between those ages do not get the nourishment that they deserve, then they remain stunted. 38% of our children are undernourished in this country. 50% of our women are anemic in this country. So you have to look after your human resource, which is the most prized resource in our country, from that level onwards. And that's the beginning of that will be the beginning of our attempt to get to this target of $5 trillion economy. So friends, I've tried to sort of put before you an agenda of reforms, starting at the very grassroots where the nourishment is required, where the behavior of our mothers has to change, so that they can give to their children, breastfeed them and give them enough nourishment. And the mothers need to be nourished. And this is why in September we are celebrating what is called the Poshan Ma, the Nourishment Month, etc. And that attention from there to exports and achieving the scale, economies of scale in our export industries, to the vacation of spaces by the public sector, is a big agenda. But believe you me, we are at it, and hopefully by the time you reach your middle age, not even much younger, you will find that India has emerged as probably the 3rd largest economy in the world, both in PPP and maybe also in nominal terms. So all the best to you as you go forward. Thank you.
take some questions. I know some of you have questions, so please, quick, short questions, and we'll take one from behind as well.
Yeah. Hi, I'm Professor Seema Sharma from University of...
Louder.
Yeah, I'm Professor Seema Sharma from University of Delhi, and I'm very delighted to listen your points because, with respect to this women and child and all nutrition, I think I have a point to make because I have got a project I have actually applied for, and the project is basically to, this Maternity Benefit Act 2017 has come up. Ministry of Women and Child Development has come up with minimum guidelines.
Minimum guidelines.
Guidelines on Maternity Benefit Act 2017, under which it has been said that organizations or institutes where 50 and above, individuals are working, it should have a crèche. I think it starts from there. The women who are working. So there are several points are there, but then nutrition as far as thing is concerned. So the question is that, my point of question is that I need to understand that where it's going. The women need to have a kind of safe place where they can keep their kids. And, so crèches need to be taken care, proper. So I want to make this point, that the crèches need to be taken care. Otherwise, this nutrition will not be, going. So this is one of my...
Point taken, Deepa. Of course, crèches are needed and we are far short of it, but you will appreciate that the problem of undernourished children is much bigger.
Yes.
And much bigger, and especially in the rural areas and in the slums, where you have I think I may have missed the thing of communication. Crèches are required after 24 months. In fact, they are actually required after 48 months. Where child starts, in the preschool area. You see, I am talking about the age of 6 months to 24 months, right? Because that is where the actual development, the brain development takes place. And the best way out there is up to 6 months only mothers feed, and then proper nourishment till 24. 24 months it is. After that, sorry, your neurons don't develop any longer. That's what has happened. Your brain size is determined at that age. So that is where the real issue is. And what you need, therefore, and which is why we are putting up in Niti Aayog now what we call a behavioral policy unit or a nudge unit, to change the behavior of our mothers and of our elders. Because food is not nourishment, and which is where we are getting caught. And that is where I think the problem, what you're saying is of course right, but the problem is much bigger in that sense.
Yes, sir. One more question.
Sorry.
And I'm here for about 7 minutes, so please go ahead and ask.
So, firstly, thank you for taking time of your busy schedule and coming here today, and thank you for the talk. So,
It's only because of a vice chancellor.
So I'm pretty sure you'd agree when I say that for the $5 trillion economy, we require very strong structural reforms, especially infrastructural reforms. And the recent banking crisis and things like that we've seen a lot of NPAs and a lot of frauds, basically. So banks are very wary and very skeptical for lending out, lending out money for long-term projects. And in one of your recent interviews, you talked about how NBFCs are the key for getting us out of this economic slowdown. So how do you propose to sort of allocate funds to these NBFCs, and what do you think is the future of NBFCs in our country?
How much detail do you want to go into?
So basically about the NBFCs. So that's
But the the first reform that you need to have is in the public sector banks that you have here. And the good statistics there is that the market cap of all public sector banks taken together is now just about equal to, in fact, less than their book value. If you exclude State Bank of India, whose market cap is 1.4 of the book value, if you exclude them, they're all negative. So despite having put in 2.5 lakh crore in the last 3 years, these banks have actually, now, they've not added value. So what you need is a very big public sector bank reform, which the finance minister, parts of which has been announced by merging them, by having better board governance, by giving them another 70,000 crore of capitalization, etc. Because these banks, the credit to GDP ratio is critically dependent on these banks' ability to give out more credit. That's the first part. The second part of it is that the NBFCs have faced huge regulatory sort of confusion. They don't know who is regulating them. Is it the registrar of cooperative sometimes, or is it the Reserve Bank, or is it the regional rural bank, etc. And so they've had now it's becoming clear for the first time that the RBI will regulate them. And this is where I think the information asymmetry that you had, about NBFCs that you didn't know, I think will now come to an end, and therefore they will be able to perform their role better. Now, for the NBFCs, the issue simply is that they have to also do their asset liability management much better, because they borrow at high rates and then they lend long sometimes, and that can't be taken off. But in the banking sector, let me put the last thing that I want to say is that we have to talk about the financial sector as a whole and not just the banking sector. It's become a bit of an Indian problem that the only financing agents that we almost think about all the time are commercial banks. There are other instruments, as you know, in the capital market. For example, there has been hardly any IPO issue in the whole of last year in this country. So we need to develop the entire financial sector capital in this country. And there what you may want to have is to look at very carefully the recommendations of the Financial Sector Reform Committee or the implementation of what is called the Indian Finance Code that was recommended. And I think that will lead you to some to a good distance.
Last small question.
Small question. Okay. So.
And your name?
I'm Amlan Dasgupta. I'm assistant professor at Banking and Finance School. My question is about the first part of the government's mandate that you talked about, that where the objective was to ensure that the benefits of growth actually trickles down to the lowest levels. So my question is basically, have we seen the last of that kind of an effort here, and do you think that the efforts that have already been taken, especially the LPG scheme as well as the bank account scheme, are they going to be enough to ensure that the benefits of growth trickle down? And are we going to see a complete shift of focus towards generating growth rather than ensuring this?
Not at all. I mean, I think that's clearly not, because what has been achieved is far from sufficient. Because even now, I mean, we say that every village, for example, has been connected to electricity, but not every household. What you want is power to reach every household, and that's what you require. I mean, education sector reforms are something which are essential for the equality of opportunity that you must ensure. Ayushman Bharat has just started, and therefore, because there's a clear evidence that up to 30% of people would slip back into poverty because of a medical emergency. Now, at the moment, only 34 million is very credible that in 1 year, 34 million people have been issued these cards. The Ayushman, whatever it's called, there's a scheme, the cards, and 2 million beneficiaries have already been paid out of it. And 50,000 now are taking advantage on a daily basis. But the point is that you have to cover 500 million people on the health side. The point is, of course, that you have to cover, you have to maybe make sure that even the food, subsidy that you get under the, National Food Security Act can be given directly and doesn't need to go through all the rigmarole that we have at this time. So there's a lot to be done there, huge amount to be done there. But nothing of that can be done if you don't get growth. So this is why growth is a necessary condition for that. And that you can't either deny, or you can't actually even ignore. You have to actually focus on it like a laser. As long as you don't get that growth which generates jobs and generate incomes, and therefore generates taxes and public revenues, none of that would be possible. So this is why now they focus on growth to get that going. But that focus will of course remain because the government is committed to its philosophy of Antyodaya. And that's what is one of its sort of solid, one of its main pillars is that, which is called the Antyodaya, which you know what Antyodaya means.
Poorest of the poor.
Hmm?
Until
The one with the last of the queue, at the end of the queue. So that's what, in fact, if I had my way, I would get an index going about how the last decile of the population, how their life is improving on a year basis. This is a World Bank suggestion many years ago. Francois Bourgogne made that suggestion. Some of you should do that project actually together. Can we measure the last decile, the living standard, of the last decile of the population? Choose some district, try and do that, create an index. It will be an amazing thing that you can do and can be set up as a model. Yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Rajiv Kumar.
I just have to ask one thing since you are here. There is a feeling that the degree of distrust with the private sector is so profoundly affected both domestic and international investment. And it may just be a perception, but is that something which government has to take more seriously and address it? And to what extent that is also connected to overzealous tax authorities engaging with businesses, across the country?
This must be a misperception because this is the Prime Minister who in Gujarat had the red carpet out for every possible investor. And vibrant Gujarat and getting Tatas into where he got and the whole coming up of that. What is Sanand area? Is an industrial area. When you mention Gujarat, you think about private enterprise, right? I mean, that's the Gujarati sort of ethos, if you like, more than anywhere else. So it cannot be that this government mistrusts or distrusts or doesn't appreciate. In fact, again, I have not heard any Prime Minister talk about private sector wealth creators to be respected on an Independence Day speech, which is what he did this time, just to remove this perception and remove this misperception. So I think, but nonetheless, because it persists, which is why I said what I said at the last, that you need to strengthen your social capital, so that over decades what has happened is that there is this bureaucracy versus this, civil society versus that, students versus trade union versus employers. Now you have a German model where trade unions and employers work together. So this whole conflictual model, as is reflected also in all our TV channels, The Big Fight, that's the program that gets, why should it be called The Big Fight, for example? I mean, there are others similar in all the channels. So we celebrate conflict. We celebrate conflict. And we also, I just heard this the other day, we celebrate also what I call the sovereignty of the individual, which is the individual can question anything under the sun and has the right to do so. And wonderful. I mean, I think it's there. The big good story, of course, is that Ram came back from his victory over Ravan, etc., etc. And there was this man sitting in the crowd and say, "What about your wife here? You sent him away." And their poor girl lady had to be sent away. One person out there. So that's the ethos we need to change somehow. We need to get all of us together to say that, look, this is something that we need to, if I can curtail my sovereignty for a while, for the common good, this whole notion of public, good, of the commons, if you like, that has somehow got to be created, and I think that has to, and the places to begin actually are the universities and the schools. I mean, this whole notion about cleanliness stops at the threshold of my apartment, and the rest of the staircase can be a garbage, bin, has to change. And that's what, one means about the problem of the commons. The problems of the commons are and ultimately a nation can go only as far as is the common weal, not individual. So, so that I think, but this perception has to be changed, because this government surely believes implicitly in the role of the private enterprise.
Professor Ambassador Mohan Kumar, please, your closing remarks.
Thank you very much. I'll be very, very brief. Dr. Rajiv Kumar, Vice Chairman, Niti Aayog, Professor Raj Kumar, Vice Chancellor of the University, Dean of the school, the Vice Dean of the school. Listen, I'll try to bring an ex-diplomat's perspective. Very briefly, there is a disconnect between the strategic weight of India and the trade weight of India. We are punching far above our weight in terms of strategic and foreign policy terms. $2.8 trillion is simply not enough. It will not make the cut. Today, if the action you have taken in Kashmir is pretty much you are able to silence most people, it's because of the $2.8 trillion. Do not forget that. If we were a $1 trillion economy, things would have been very different. So we need to get to $5 trillion as quickly as possible. I'll make 2 points. You will get there eventually. The question is how soon. That is really the issue. You will get there. 5 trillion, I think we will be there. The question is how soon. Secondly, would I rather have a $4 trillion economy with lesser inequality? I would say yes. But that's a debate that you can have. Are you going to be so obsessed about 5 trillion that you don't worry too much about what the economists call Gini coefficient? I would worry about it today, but that's just my point of view. Last point really, as an ex-trade negotiator, I was looking at the math as I was coming, and since this is Ashish's sweet revenge on me. We spent some quality time in Australia, and this guy puts me in a closing session after somebody of the caliber of Dr. Rajiv Kumar in front of people who want to get the hell out and go back and have fun. This is the limit, but thank you, Ashish. So I'll do my best. $2.8 trillion economy, 50% is foreign trade. Your imports, your exports of merchandise and services is 50%. If you want to be $5 trillion, $2.5 trillion has got to be your exports and imports of merchandise and services. My question is, where is this going to come from? I think we should have done some FTAs. This is my personal view, of course, because the MFN-based WTO-anchored multilateral trading system is finished. Nobody trades on MFN basis except India. Everybody else has got an FTA tariff. Our exporters cannot export on MFN basis. They have to get an FTA. So I would actually argue we missed a trick when we did not do an FTA with Europe. We should have done it, but better late than never. And RCEP is a very tough one, and Dr. Rajiv Kumar is in the middle of it, I know, and Niti Aayog. My own think tank, Sir RAS, as you know, which I happen to head, also contributes to it. It's a very tough one. But I think, frankly, if you don't inflict pain on your private sector, they will not reform. That's just India. You have to inflict pain. It's because we are reformers by compulsion. We are not reformers by conviction, even now. You have to force your industry to become more and more competitive. So I have this outlier view, because most people say you have to listen to the industry, and if you can't face competition from China, you're finished. I really think if you don't face competition now, we will never face competition. So with those words, I at least leave you with some food for thought. Thank you for your attention.
Now I request Vice Chancellor Professor Sri Raj Kumar to hand over memento to Mr. Rajiv Kumar.
Institute of Eminent
Please, please be seated. Students, quiet. Is he coming back? You will do the medals. Yeah. It's better here. Hey, folks, please be quiet. Santraj, come, come. So, okay. You guys are happy? Good. So, we're going to hand over the medals and the certificates to both the teams. So I'm going to call by name. Can you please come forward and collect your certificate and quiet, guys, please. Quiet. Baljinder, please. Likita, thank you. Aaron Anish Cherian. Amlan. Amya Gupta. Pratik Pratyaya. Please come quickly. Ria Vij. Sarthak Aneja. Now to the research team, Likita Eridala. Prisha Sood. Vedant Ade. Please be quiet. Aman. Jaiveer, please be quiet. Mirjit Singh. And Arnav Jain. Now to the runner-up team from the 2019 batch. Niklesh Dawar. Somidi, take over. Prabhav Tomar. Prabhav Tomar. Sachi Rajpal. Vidit Kanduri. Aman Madan. Now to this research team, Nimisha Nanda. Sarveshwaran Ranganathan. Devna Kandelwal. Priyadarshi Mishra. And Karan Dhawan. But afterwards. So, before we close, your eyes are wandering. Let it not wander. Please look here. Let the smell not waffle around. So, first of all, I want to thank all of you students for.
I want to say something. How many of you, is there any non-BCom student here? Non-JSBF student here? Okay, I tell you, I am most impressed with each one of you. I mean, you have just been so amazing. I can tell you on the record, it would be impossible for law students to be so disciplined here. I mean, it would be impossible for any other school students to be so committed and dedicated and spend the last 2 days here. I mean, I am really impressed. I want to say this because, see, I mean, I'm not even remotely suggesting that all of you listened to everything that was said the last 2 days. I know, as we've all been students. But having said that, the fact that you chose to be here, most of you, if not all of you, and I do believe, and I said this when we started yesterday, that you may not even understand and appreciate how many different dimensions and perspectives were thrown at you. But mind has a very interesting way of recalling things, and that has a germination time, and you will very quickly realize, sometimes in a week, sometimes in a month, sometimes in 6 months, sometimes in a year, and maybe even 2-3 years later, something else you will be studying or working, and something that was discussed here, even when you paid half attention, will come back to you. And that's the nature. All of us who are older than you have gone through that. So the fact that you were here and occasionally listened to what happened, that's already a big deal, and you can be very proud of yourself. So I am very proud of you, and thank you so much.
So, Professor Rajkumar, the first part of what you said about JSBF students being the best, it will go in a loop on our website. It has been recorded.
I saw the camera.
Yes. Good. So to close out, I want to thank, obviously, the students were absolutely marvelous, though there were some things that we discussed yesterday, but notwithstanding that, you guys were like amazing, waking up at 6:30 or 6 o'clock and being here, which is a strength of show of character, which is good. We also want to thank a number of other folks. First and foremost, I want to thank Pritika and Santraj for doing an amazing job. Right there. I just cannot imagine what we could have done without those two folks, right? So the huge effort from their side. I want to thank the design team for putting the wonderful logo, and so Ankit and Deepak and others for making all these designs happening in the matter of 2 days, working over the weekend, so that is amazing. Of course, to the events team of Akshat and Deepa, Rohit, and a whole bunch of others who helped organize this team together. Also want to thank the mentors, Amlan and Soumyadeep, for sitting through, providing guidance to them. And of course, the rest of the JSBF faculty for supporting in all other different ways that behind the scenes. That was great. And so, big round of applause to the faculty members who did. Professor Ashish Bharadwaj, you have been leading by example, sometimes in a little more congenial way, sometimes not so. For a better part of last week, he was in the US, operating on a different time zone, but I don't think he was operating at the US time zone or the India time zone. What he was doing was operating at both time zones. So huge round of applause to make sure that this thing went absolutely well. To all the invited guests and, who came in, including Professor Mohan Kumar, who was not arm-twisted, for sure. He really wanted to be here, even though he may say something else, right? So thank you so much for coming. And finally, I have to say that whenever I'm in a conference or a meeting like this, something good happens to Professor Rajkumar. So last time we were in a meeting where we were talking about the problems at Jindal Global City in that big conference room, and that's when you got the note about the Institute of Eminence. Recommendation, right? So that was on August 2nd at 3:30 p.m. Now, yesterday was it? Yes, yesterday we were here with us at the inaugural with the JSBF team, and we got the great news. So, absolutely. But this whole event wouldn't have been possible without the support, leadership, guidance, and vision, and operational support as well from him and his office, and it would have definitely not been possible. So a big round of applause to our VC, Professor Rajkumar. Thank you.